Chapter 1. The silence he finally noticed. By 8 o'clock on Monday morning, Damian Blackwood had received 17 messages, 3 urgent calls, and 1 carefully worded warning from the men who managed the most sensitive parts of his empire. He answered every one of them with the same cold efficiency he had become known for. Numbers were checked. Meetings were moved. Decisions were made. Nothing in his world waited for anyone. Nothing except one person. Ethan Carter had always been there. A message before breakfast. A quiet question during the afternoon. A simple good night before Damian went to sleep. Damian had never considered how much space those small messages occupied in his life because they had never stopped. Until today. His phone remained silent. Damian glanced at the screen while sitting behind the dark walnut desk in his downtown office. No message from Ethan. He looked away. 5 minutes later he checked again. Still nothing. His expression did not change, but the man standing across from him noticed. "Do you want me to reschedule the afternoon meeting?" his assistant asked. Damian lifted his eyes. "No." The answer came immediately. "Keep everything as planned." The meeting continued, but Damian found himself distracted by the silence. Ethan had never been demanding. He had never asked Damian to choose between him and the business. He had simply been present, patient even when Damian was distant. Lately, Damian had convinced himself that Ethan understood. That if Damian did not answer immediately, Ethan would wait. If Damian canceled dinner, Ethan would understand. If Damian disappeared for 2 days because of business, Ethan would still be there when he returned. Damian had treated Ethan's patience like something permanent. By noon, he had checked his phone 11 times. By 3 in the afternoon, he had stopped pretending it did not bother him. He opened their message thread. The last message from Ethan had been sent 2 nights earlier. "I hope you are taking care of yourself." Damian had read it and never answered. There was nothing after it. No follow-up. No question. No good night. For the first time, the silence felt deliberate. That evening, Damian returned to his penthouse overlooking the city. The lights of Chicago stretched beneath his windows, bright and distant. He loosened his tie and placed his phone on the kitchen counter. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Nothing. Damian picked up the phone and typed a message. "Where are you?" He stared at the words before sending them. The message showed as delivered. No reply. He waited another minute, then called. The call rang until it ended. Damian stood perfectly still. Ethan had never ignored his calls. Not once. A strange uneasiness settled beneath Damian's usual control. He called again. This time, the call went directly to voicemail. Damian lowered the phone slowly. He had spent years building a world where people answered when he called. Tonight, one person had chosen not to. And for the first time, Damian Blackwood understood that Ethan Carter's silence was not a temporary mood. It was a decision. By 11:45 that night, Damian had stopped pretending he was waiting for a reply. He had moved through 3 rooms of his penthouse without accomplishing anything useful, checking the city through the windows, checking his phone, then checking it again. Ethan's silence had become an irritation he could not dismiss. At 12:17, Damian called his driver. "Take me to Ethan's apartment." There was a brief pause. "The old address?" "No." "The new one." Damian had never asked Ethan directly where he had moved. That realization bothered him more than it should have. He had known Ethan's habits, his favorite coffee shop, the bookstore he visited on Sundays, even the brand of tea he kept in his kitchen. Yet he had never bothered to ask for the address of the place Ethan called home. 40 minutes later, Damian stood in a quiet residential building on the north side of the city. The hallway was warm and brightly lit, completely different from the guarded entrances and private elevators he was accustomed to. He looked at the apartment number in his hand. Then he knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. Inside, Ethan had been sitting on the edge of his bed, reading the same page of a book for nearly 20 minutes. When the knock came, he froze. He had not expected anyone. He walked quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. His breath caught. Damian stood alone in the hallway, dressed in a black coat. his dark hair slightly disordered from the cold wind outside. Ethan stared at him for several seconds. Then he stepped back without opening the door. Another knock came. "Ethan." Damian's voice was low, controlled, but there was something unfamiliar beneath it. Concern. Ethan folded his arms. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk." "You had plenty of opportunities to talk." Silence followed. Damian looked at the closed door. "Open the door." Ethan almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You ignored me for weeks, Damian. You canceled plans without explaining. You stopped answering my calls. Now you show up at my apartment after midnight and expect me to open the door because you asked?" Damian's jaw tightened. "I did not come here to argue." "Then why did you come?" Damian did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the elevator at the end of the hall. His expression changed. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" "Someone found you." The words landed differently from everything else he had said that night. Ethan slowly lowered his arms. "What do you mean?" Damian stepped closer to the door but did not touch it. "Your new address was accessed tonight." Ethan's face went pale. "By who?" "I do not know yet." That answer frightened Ethan more than a name would have. Damian continued. "But whoever it was did not get the information from you." Ethan looked toward the window at the far end of his apartment. The street below appeared quiet. Ordinary. Safe. Suddenly, it did not feel safe at all. "How did you find me?" he asked. Damian's voice became quieter. "Because I have people watching the places connected to you." Ethan stared at the door. "So you were watching me?" "I was making sure you were safe." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. The explanation should have comforted him. Instead, it raised a question he could no longer ignore. If Damian had known where he was, why had he spent weeks pretending Ethan did not matter? Damian spoke again. "Ethan, please open the door." Ethan's hand hovered near the lock. Then he stopped. Outside, Damian waited. And for the first time, Ethan wondered whether his silence had not made Damian come looking for him at all. Perhaps someone else had been looking for him first. For several seconds, Ethan kept his hand away from the lock. Damian remained on the other side of the door, waiting without another command. That restraint unsettled Ethan more than the demands had. "How long?" Ethan finally asked. "How long have you known someone was watching me?" Damian took a breath before answering. "For days." Ethan stared at the door. "And you said nothing." "I needed to confirm what I was seeing." "So you decided silence was better?" Damian did not answer. Ethan gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "That sounds familiar." The words clearly struck him. "Ethan, I made a mistake." "You made several." Before Damian could respond, Ethan unlocked the door but opened it only a few inches. The hallway light fell across his face. Damian looked at him carefully, as though making sure he was really there. "You look tired," he said. "You came here after midnight to tell me that?" Ethan asked. Damian almost smiled, but stopped himself. "No. I came because the situation changed tonight." He reached into his coat and removed his phone. "Look." Ethan hesitated before stepping closer. Damian showed him a photograph taken from across the street. It showed Ethan leaving a grocery store earlier that afternoon. Nothing about the picture seemed unusual until Ethan noticed the timestamp. The photograph had been taken less than 20 minutes after he left the store. "That is not one of your people," Ethan said. "No." Damian swiped to another image. Ethan leaving a coffee shop. Then another. Ethan entering his apartment building. The dates were different, but the same dark sedan appeared in the background. Ethan's stomach tightened. "How long?" "At least 6 days." He looked again. "You said 4. "For days since my security team identified the pattern. 6 days since the first confirmed image." Ethan stepped back from the doorway. Suddenly, small details from the past week seemed different. The car parked across from the laundromat. The unfamiliar man who had stood near the coffee shop. The elevator that had stopped on his floor twice without anyone getting off. He had noticed them, but he had never connected them. "Why would anyone watch me?" Ethan asked. Damian lowered the phone. That is what I am trying to find out. You have enemies everywhere. Not like this. Damian's voice became quieter. Whoever is doing this knows your routine. They know where you shop. They know where you work. They even know when you leave home. Ethan looked at him sharply. Then they know I am talking to you right now. Damian's expression hardened. Yes. The answer made the hallway feel suddenly smaller. Ethan looked toward the stairwell, then back at Damian. You said the information was accessed tonight. What information? Damian paused. Your address. From where? A private database used by several companies connected to my organization. Ethan frowned. So someone inside your organization searched for me. That is one possibility. And the other? Damian met his eyes. Someone outside my organization already had access. Ethan felt a chill move through him. He had spent the last 2 days believing Damian had finally come because he missed him. Now he understood something far worse. Damian had not come looking for the relationship they had lost. He had come because someone else had found Ethan first. Ethan opened the door a little wider. Come inside. Damian stepped over the threshold. But before he could say anything, Ethan looked at the photograph again. The dark sedan was parked across the street from his building. In the reflection of its windshield, a second figure was visible. Ethan pointed at the screen. Damian. That person is not watching my apartment. Damian looked closer. Ethan's voice dropped. They are watching the entrance to your building too. Chapter 2. The Secret Inside the Blackwood Empire. Damian stared at the photograph for several seconds before taking the phone from Ethan's hand. You are right, he said quietly. That changes things. Ethan watched his expression. What does it change? Damian enlarged the image and studied the reflection in the windshield. The person in this car is positioned where they can monitor both entrances. So they are not only interested in you. Damian looked toward the apartment window. They are tracking everyone who comes near you. Ethan folded his arms. Including you. Including me. The answer was immediate. Ethan stepped away from the door. Then tell me the truth. Why have you been watching me? Damian placed the phone on the counter. Because I was trying to keep you away from my world. Ethan gave him a disbelieving look. By ignoring me? Damian looked down for a moment. I thought distance would make you safer. You could have told me that. I know. You could have answered one message. Damian nodded. I know. Ethan's frustration was no longer hidden. You made me believe I did not matter. Damian finally looked directly at him. That was never true. The room fell quiet. Outside, a car passed along the street, its headlights briefly moving across the wall. Ethan watched the light disappear. Then what was true? He asked. Damian hesitated. For a man who was accustomed to giving orders without explaining himself, the hesitation seemed almost unnatural. There are people inside my organization who have been looking for information about you. Ethan frowned. Why? I do not know yet. You keep saying that. Damian moved toward the kitchen table and stopped a few feet away. There is something you need to understand about my family. Ethan remained silent. The Blackwood organization is larger than what you see in the news. Some of our businesses are legitimate. Others exist in places where trust matters more than contracts. For years, I have kept certain parts of that world separate from my personal life. Ethan looked at him. And I became a problem because I was part of your personal life. You became a vulnerability. Damian's voice was careful. Not because of anything you did. Because someone could use you to reach me. Ethan looked toward the photograph again. Then why did they wait until now? Damian's expression changed. That is the question I have been asking myself. He opened another file on his phone. It contained a list of recent security alerts, each one connected to Ethan's name. One entry had been marked only a few hours earlier. Ethan leaned closer. What is that? Damian did not answer immediately. Your address was not the only thing accessed tonight. He turned the phone toward Ethan. Someone searched for your employment records, your previous addresses, and your family information. Ethan's face tightened. My family? Yes. Why would they care about my family? Damian's silence answered before his words did. Because they may be looking for something connected to you. Ethan shook his head. There is nothing. Damian studied him carefully. Are you certain? Ethan looked away. For a moment, an old memory surfaced. Something his mother had once told him about a box of documents kept in storage after his father's death. He had never understood why she insisted that no one outside the family should see them. He had forgotten about them years ago, or thought he had. Ethan slowly turned back toward Damian. There may be something. Damian's eyes narrowed. What? Ethan swallowed. I do not know what it means yet. Damian stepped closer. Then we find out before someone else does. Ethan looked at the man who had ignored him for weeks, then at the evidence spreading across the table. Their relationship was no longer the only thing standing between them. There was a secret neither of them understood, and someone had already started searching for it. The room had become too quiet. Ethan stood beside the kitchen table, staring at the old memory that had suddenly returned to him. My mother kept a storage box after my father died, he said. She told me never to throw it away. Damian remained focused on him. Where is it? A storage facility in Evanston, about 20 miles from here. Damian reached for his phone. We can go tonight. Ethan shook his head. You cannot just take me somewhere because you decide it is safer. Damian stopped. The words seemed to remind him of something Ethan had said earlier. Then what do you want to do? Ethan looked at the photographs spread across the table. I want to know why someone is looking for me before I let you make another decision for me. Damian nodded slowly. Fair. It was the first time that night he had accepted Ethan's decision without arguing. They left the apartment through the parking garage shortly after 1 in the morning. Damian kept his distance while Ethan walked beside him, carrying nothing except his phone and a small set of keys. The city was unusually quiet, the streets nearly empty beneath the streetlights. Damian's driver waited near the entrance, but Ethan noticed another vehicle parked farther down the block. Is that one of yours? He asked. Damian glanced toward it. No. His driver received a quiet instruction, and they left by a different route. 25 minutes later, they arrived at the storage facility. Damian stayed close as Ethan unlocked the unit. Inside were old boxes, winter coats, photo albums, and furniture covered with sheets. Ethan moved toward the back wall and found a faded cardboard box with his father's name written across the lid. His fingers paused before lifting it. This is it. Damian did not touch the box. You should open it. Ethan removed the lid. Inside were several envelopes, a worn leather folder, and an old photograph of his father standing beside 3 unfamiliar men. Ethan picked up the photograph. I have never seen these people. Damian took one careful look and immediately became still. You know them. It was not a question. Damian pointed to the man on the left. That is Victor Hale. Ethan frowned. Who is he? He used to handle financial operations for my family. Damian pointed to the second man. That is Richard Vale. He disappeared almost 15 years ago. Ethan looked at the third man. Damian's expression changed again. And him? Ethan asked. Damian took a slow breath. My father. Ethan stared at the photograph. Your father knew mine? They worked together. Damian opened the leather folder and found several pages filled with handwritten numbers, company names, and dates. One page contained a familiar name. Ethan Carter. His own name. Why is my name here? He whispered. Damian read the page twice. This was written before you were born. Ethan looked at him in disbelief. That is impossible. Damian shook his head. Then someone knew your family long before I ever met you. Ethan's hands tightened around the photograph. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer about a stranger following him. It was about a connection between 2 families that had existed for years. Damian turned another page and found a sentence written beneath a list of accounts. Keep the Carter records separate. Never let Blackwood heirs know where they are. Ethan looked at Damian. What records? Damian's expression hardened. I think we just found the reason someone is looking for you. Then the lights outside the storage unit suddenly went out, leaving the hallway beyond the open door in darkness. The storage facility remained silent for several seconds after the lights went out. Ethan held the photograph against his chest and looked toward the dark hallway. Damian immediately moved closer, but he did not touch Ethan. Stay here, he said. Ethan shook his head. You said you would stop making decisions for me. Damian paused. You are right. He took out his phone and switched on the flashlight. A narrow beam crossed the concrete floor, revealing an empty hallway and several closed storage units. Nothing moved. The emergency lights came on a moment later, washing everything in a dim red glow. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was strange. Damian looked toward the control panel near the entrance. Someone may have triggered the system. Could it be a coincidence? Possibly. Damian looked back at the documents. But I stopped believing in coincidences tonight. Ethan placed the photograph inside the leather folder. Then we need to know what these records mean. They returned to the apartment before dawn. Damian had one of his trusted analysts examine the documents, but Ethan insisted on staying in the room while the information was reviewed. For the first time, Damian did not object. An hour later, the analyst called with an update. We found references to several old Blackwood accounts, Damian said. Most were closed years ago. One remained active. Ethan leaned forward. Where? I do not know yet. The record only gives an internal identification number. Ethan looked at the handwritten note again. Maybe my father's records can tell us. He opened another envelope from the folder and found a small metal key taped inside. There was no label, only a number engraved on the side. Damian recognized it immediately. That is a Blackwood archive key. Ethan looked at him. Why would my father have one? Because someone gave it to him. Damian's phone rang. He answered and listened without speaking. His expression changed gradually. Say that again. He listened for several seconds. Do not access the archive. I will handle it personally. He ended the call. Ethan watched him. What happened? Damian sat across from him. Someone tried to access the same archive less than an hour ago. Ethan felt the pieces begin to connect. They knew about the key. Apparently. How? Damian looked at the folder. Only a few people knew that archive existed. Ethan studied his face. Your family? My father. 2 senior partners. And 1 person who worked directly for him. Ethan remembered the names from the photograph.
Victor Hale.
Damian nodded. Victor Hale disappeared after my father's death. We believed he had left the country. Ethan looked down at the old photograph. Maybe he did not. Damian remained quiet. Ethan noticed something else in the folder. A small folded sheet hidden beneath the lining. He carefully pulled it free. There were only 4 lines written on the page. The first 3 were account numbers. The 4th contained a name. Damian Blackwood. Ethan looked up. Why would your name be here? Damian took the paper but did not answer immediately. His phone rang again. This time, the message was brief. Someone had accessed a second file using Damian's private credentials. Damian slowly lowered the phone. Ethan understood before he spoke. Someone inside your organization. Damian nodded. Yes. The man who had spent his life trusting almost no one suddenly looked genuinely uncertain. Ethan closed the folder. Then your biggest problem is not finding who is watching me. Damian met his eyes. What is it? Ethan's voice was steady. Finding out who has been watching you. Chapter 3. The door I chose to open. The city was still dark when Ethan finished reading the last message on Damian's phone. Someone inside the Blackwood organization had used Damian's private credentials to access information connected to Ethan. The discovery should have made Ethan feel safer with Damian beside him. Instead, it made him understand how little control either of them had over the situation. You need to leave, Damian said. Ethan looked up. We both do. Damian shook his head.
No.
You should leave first. Ethan stared at him. And go where? Somewhere no one associates with me. Ethan gave a tired smile. That is exactly the problem, Damian. Every solution you offer still begins with you deciding what happens to me. Damian said nothing. Ethan placed the leather folder on the table and closed it carefully. You ignored me because you thought you knew what was best for me. You watched me without telling me. You kept information from me because you believed you were protecting me. His voice remained calm, but every word carried the weight of weeks of disappointment. I cannot keep living like that. Damian looked toward the window. Dawn was beginning to brighten the edge of the skyline. I understand. Ethan studied him. Do you? Damian turned back. I do now. He reached into his coat and removed a small key. He placed it on the table without pushing it toward Ethan. This is for a guest apartment outside the city. It is secure, but you do not have to use it. If you want somewhere else, I will arrange transportation and leave the choice to you. Ethan looked at the key. You are not coming? Not unless you ask me to. That answer surprised him. Damian continued. I have spent too long believing that protecting you meant controlling every variable around you. It did not work. Ethan lowered his eyes. For the first time since Damian had arrived at his apartment, he saw no command in his expression. Only uncertainty. What are you going to do? Ethan asked. Find the person using my credentials. Alone. With people I trust. Ethan almost laughed. You just told me you do not know who you can trust. Damian's mouth tightened. That is why I am going to start with the people who have access to my private systems. Ethan looked at the old photograph again. And Victor Hale? I will find out whether he is alive. Silence settled between them. Ethan picked up the key, then placed it back on the table. I am not going to that apartment. Damian looked surprised. Where will you go? Ethan walked toward the bedroom and returned with a small overnight bag. I have a friend in Milwaukee. I can stay there for a few days. Damian's expression changed immediately. That is more than 90 miles from here. Exactly. Damian nodded. He did not argue. Ethan stopped at the door with his bag in one hand. You should know something. Damian waited. I still care about you. That is why this hurts. Damian's eyes softened. Ethan. But caring about you does not mean I have to accept being controlled by you. Damian looked down for a moment. You should not. Ethan opened the door. Cold morning air moved through the hallway. He stepped outside, then looked back once. Damian remained inside the apartment, making no attempt to stop him. That was the first real change Ethan had seen all night. Damian could have ordered him to stay. He could have sent someone after him. Instead, he simply said, Call me if you need anything. Ethan gave a small nod and walked toward the elevator. Behind him, Damian stayed by the open door. For the first time, Ethan was leaving because he had chosen to, not because Damian had pushed him away. And for the first time, Damian understood that if Ethan ever came back, it would have to be because Ethan wanted to. By the following evening, Ethan was sitting alone in a small hotel room outside Milwaukee, staring at the key Damian had given him. He had not called. Damian had not called either. For the first time in weeks, the silence between them felt different. It was no longer punishment. It was space. Ethan had spent the afternoon reviewing the documents from his father's storage box, trying to understand why his name had appeared in records created before he was born. Nothing made sense until his phone received a message from an unknown number. Do not trust the person you left behind. Ethan read it twice. Then another message appeared. He gave you the choice because he knows you will return. Ethan immediately called Damian. The call connected after one ring. Where are you? Damian asked. Milwaukee. Are you safe? Yes. Damian exhaled quietly. Good. Ethan expected him to ask when he was coming back, but Damian said nothing else. I received a message, Ethan said. Tell me. Ethan read both messages aloud. Damian became silent. Do you recognize the number?
No.
Then why does it sound like someone who knows what happened between us? Damian asked. Ethan looked at the key on the table. Because they may have been watching both of us. Damian did not disagree. I found something else, Ethan said. There is a record connected to my father that was created after his death. What kind of record? A transfer authorization. Damian's voice changed. Transfer of what? I do not know. The file is incomplete. Ethan heard papers moving on Damian's side. I may have found the missing reference. Ethan sat upright. Where? An old Blackwood archive. Ethan remembered the metal key. The key? Yes. Damian paused. But I am not going there without you. Ethan frowned. Why? Because the record is connected to your family. You should be the one deciding what happens to it. Ethan was quiet. The Damian he knew would have already made the decision and sent someone to retrieve the file. This time he was waiting. Come to Milwaukee, Ethan said. I did not say I was asking you to protect me. I know. Then why are you coming? Damian answered after a long pause. Because you asked. 2 hours later, Ethan heard a knock at his hotel door. He opened it and found Damian standing alone in the hallway. No guards. No instructions. No demands. Damian looked at him but did not step forward. Are you sure? He asked. Ethan looked at the man who had once treated his silence as something temporary, then remembered the night Damian had stood outside his apartment asking to be let in. This time, Ethan was the one holding the door open. Come inside, he said. Damian entered slowly. Ethan closed the door behind him. For the first time, neither man was chasing the other. They were standing in the same room because they had both chosen to be there. The next morning, Ethan and Damian returned to Chicago with the old documents secured in a folder between them. The Blackwood archive was no longer a mystery. Damian had discovered that the hidden records had been created by his father and Ethan's father years ago, documenting a legitimate business partnership that had later been concealed when Victor Hale attempted to take control of the accounts. The person accessing Damian's private credentials had been one of Damian's senior advisors, a man who had quietly searched for the Carter records and used Ethan's name to locate the missing archive key. Once Damian confronted the evidence, the truth became clear. The threats, the surveillance, and the sudden interest in Ethan had all been connected to those records. The danger was over, and Victor Hale's name was finally removed from the shadows that had surrounded both families for years. Ethan stood beside the window of Damian's apartment, looking across the Chicago skyline. So that is it? He asked. Damian nodded. The records are secured. Your family is no longer being searched for. The person who accessed my credentials is gone from the organization. Ethan turned toward him. And what happens now? Damian took a moment before answering. That depends on what you want. Ethan smiled faintly. You are finally saying that. I should have said it a long time ago. Damian reached into his pocket and placed a new key on the table. Ethan looked at it but did not pick it up. What is that? A key to a house I bought outside the city. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You bought another house? I did. Without asking me? Damian smiled. It is mine. You do not have to live there. You do not have to visit. You do not even have to like it. Ethan laughed softly. That sounds more reasonable. Damian stepped closer but stopped before reaching for him. I want you in my life, Ethan. But I do not want you there because you are afraid to leave. Ethan looked down at the key. For weeks, he had wanted Damian to understand exactly that. Love could not be built on silence, control, or fear of losing someone. It had to be a choice made freely by both people. Ethan picked up the key. Damian watched him carefully. Are you sure? Damian asked. Ethan looked at him. This time I am. He walked toward the apartment door, then stopped and turned around. You know what I think is funny? Damian waited. The night you came to my door after midnight, you thought you were the one asking me to open it. Damian smiled. And now? Ethan held up the new key. Now I am deciding which door we open next. Damian laughed quietly. The tension that had followed them for weeks finally seemed to disappear. Ethan opened the door, then looked back at him. Are you coming? Damian nodded. Yes. He stepped through the doorway beside Ethan, not ahead of him. And that was the difference. Damian had once believed loving Ethan meant keeping him close enough to protect. Ethan had taught him that real love meant giving someone the freedom to stay. This time, Ethan was not being chased, rescued, or persuaded. He was choosing Damian, and Damian was finally choosing him without conditions. The door closed behind them, leaving the old silence outside.